So what you're describing is that sometimes when I say is we as professionals can go and think we've got to do something quite extreme, like move people or do something, really significant. But what you're describing is something that's equally significant and probably much more powerful, which is how do we work directly in a way that is going to give you the opportunity? How do we provide that opportunity for you to be able to build a relationship or to see professionals in a way where they might be able to be trusted or they might be able to help?
Yeah, exactly that. And it comes down to exactly what we're talking about here is powerful, positive language, empowering our young people. We don't want to be enabling them. We want to be, giving them that platform to explore their ideas in a positive and safe way. Now, another thing that really comes down to the whole trust and building those sort of relationships is making sure that you are reliable, that you are emotionally there for the young people. Because it can be a massive, massive strain on professionals day in, day out, seeing the negative result of exploitation. People that are working in pupil referral units, violent reduction units, exploitation hubs, they've all got a very common theme. They quite often have a lot of staff that feel that they're letting themselves down because they've had young people that they've worked with where the ending hasn't been so happy. Because unfortunately, when a young person is being exploited, the chances of them ending up in prison or experiencing extreme levels of violence is quite likely. So for a professional to sit there day in, day out, not seeing any success can bring quite a lot of personal problems for the professionals actually trying to benefit these young people. And this is where services really need to work together to support each other, to help each other, because they've all got this common theme of trying to end exploitation. And I know in the news and in every community across the country, things aren't looking too great. There's a lot of sadness, there's a lot of sad stories going around. But there are some successful cases. There are some success stories, and they need reminding of. Something that I am so passionate about is lived experienced work, right?
Mm.
So you do get these success stories in youth justice, VRUs, pupil referral units, whatever. But the long-term impact of that is actually getting these success stories to work for you is the biggest accomplishment you can really make, because that individual that you have then got working for you that has been exploited, that has been kicked out of school, that has gone to prison, whatever it might be, they will be a beacon of hope for all the other young people in that situation. And that's what it's really, really about. Showing people that it is possible, showing people that there is a way out, that there is a happy ending. I personally know of 2-3 different young people that were unfortunately facing prison, suffered extreme levels of violence, and they are currently some of the best youth workers you will ever come in contact with. They are getting the success stories because they understand the journey that the young person needs to go on. They understand that things aren't going to simply change overnight, and they are there for the long run. They are there to play the long game. And that is why you see so many lived experience professionals going further in this work, because they have that basic understanding that unfortunately you can't really learn from reading a book. You have to see this firsthand. You have to really feel the emotions that young people are feeling to give them that empathy. If you've never been in a trap house before, or you've never seen someone injecting heroin or overdosing or anything like that, it's actually really hard to even imagine it, because it's such a grim and awful and horrendous form, someone that's never actually had to, like physically been dropped into that situation and had to deal with it, isn't going to think the exact same. So I really believe that's kind of where all of these organisations need to start looking at. I feel like we can learn a lot from lived experience people, and that positive language and how to encourage people. But something that I do feel like we're kind of missing out ever so slightly is from a female perspective. Now, girls are going massively under the radar when it comes to exploitation. I would say from personal experience that females are suffering worse violence, that they're suffering borderline more trauma than the males. But to make it even worse, they're going more under the radar. Now, why this is again, from a personal experience, it's more because the males are a little bit more comfortable with talking about it. They don't care too much about the stigma, and usually the sexual exploitation hasn't been as significant in a male's role in a county line or anything like that. But when a female has been involved in a county line and they've also experienced the sexual exploitation side of things, the shame that they carry is beyond belief. And no organisation is really giving females that platform to understand, to realise what they've actually been through. And something that I really feel like could work, I haven't put this to practice yet in my own personal professional experience, but one-to-one work doesn't seem to work as much, right? Okay, but if you can get a load of young people, male, female, whatever that might look like, in a group setting where, when you look at a drug addict or someone that's got addiction problems, you have AA meetings. It's taken as a public health approach, it's more about rehabilitation and everything like that. Long story short, anyone coming out of an exploited relationship, they are looked at more from a criminal aspect, right? So it's all about individual work and creating those steps and making sure that they're not going to reoffend. But actually, if you take the same concept that we treat addiction for and then use that in an exploited measure, I believe that the outcome would be brilliant, because in those group sessions, you're always going to have someone doing better than the other, right? And that person that is doing better than everyone else in these group sessions is actually going to be the person that encourages everyone. They'll be sitting there in that group thinking, well, if they're doing good in life, if they've done it and they've been through similar situations to me, why can't I do it? And you all of a sudden have these group sessions where everyone's encouraging each other, everyone's being positive, everyone's on the same wavelength, and it's absolutely brilliant. And that is the sort of space and platform that we need to be giving boys and girls. We need to be treating it similarly, but obviously for girls you need to be taking into consideration the sexual exploitation side of things. And I mean, yeah, that's really where I'm at, is we need to be treating this more as a public health concern. And something else I really want to speak quite openly about here is I believe that crime is addictive. Now, I've done a lot of research on this. I've listened to a lot of podcasts. I've listened to a lot of university lecturers that argue differently, that crime is not addictive. Now, from a personal point of view, I would say it definitely is. And this is why we need to be taking the same approach. Because what I really look at when working with young people that have been exploited is something called instant gratification, okay? And this plays the biggest part in drug dealing, in criminal matters. So instant gratification is essentially where you get things instantly, right? You're a little bit impatient, so to speak, and you don't really want to put the hard work in, but you want all the rewards of things. Now, most people that are selling drugs usually fall victim to instant gratification. And the reason why this is when you sell drugs, you get that cash instantly paid into your hands, right? Okay, you're getting rewarded straight away. You're seeing that the goal is money. Also, the drug users are extremely pleased when they see you. When you're handing a drug user their drugs, they're over the moon. They're so positive. They're giving you all of that positive language that us as professionals need to be doing. So for someone then to come out of a world where they're constantly being praised for doing the wrong thing, they're seeing the reward straight away, and then you put them in an environment where a boss is going, you're not working hard enough, you're not doing this, and then to top things off, they've got to wait a whole month for their paycheck, and also that paycheck is coming in as a number on a screen. It's not cash being put into their hands. So they're not getting that instant gratification. They're not getting the same feeling doing things legitimately. And again, this is where we actually need to give these young people a little bit of a grace period, so to speak, a bit of a transition period from a criminal world into a legitimate world. Now, this can be done in many different ways, you know, by talking to them nicely, giving them that same sort of instant gratification. And I know this is very frowned upon these days, but even paying these young people in cash, right? So I struggled with this massively coming out of exploited world. I suffered a lot of violence and it was extremely horrific. And I would never ever want to go back to that. But the problem was when I transferred into a legitimate place of work, doing legitimate things, I quite found myself, I didn't feel like I was fulfilling my purpose as much. I didn't get the same sort of rewards, so to speak, because I mean, I wasn't being paid when I was being exploited, but I saw vast amount of cash, and that almost got me to work harder. This is how exploiters operate, essentially. They show you the big cash, they show you the nice cars, they show you the opportunities again, right? And you will get hooked onto that idea. You will get addicted to the fact that you could possibly one day have 10 grand laying around in the house, that you could one day be driving a Mercedes, when actually all of this is actually very unrealistic. And anyone that is working in a legitimate setting, if they got their cash out every single month from the bank, started stacking it up, everyone would go, oh my God, wow, the bus driver's minted. But it's only because it's how people perceive things. Drug dealers, exploiters, they are so good at posting the videos of all their money on Instagram, social media, whatever it might be. When your bus driver, your postman, whatever it might be, they've got money sitting in their bank. They've got houses that cost 250 grand. They've got the ability to get a mortgage and have sustainable, long-lasting wealth. And this is what's not taught to us young people, that wealth isn't about having 10 grand sitting in your bedroom. Wealth should actually more look like that you're owning a house, or that you've got stability, or that you're going on holidays, or you're spending family time, instead of the actual money value, instead of that instant gratification of getting that money slapped in your hand straight away. So I really want to do some work around crime is addictive, and we need to be treating criminals as addicts and taking the exact same approach.
There's a lot to unpack there that I'm thinking through, but you're making me smile, because the first time I met you was you stood in front of people saying, if you social workers withdrew what you get paid each month and sat it on a table and took pictures of it, everyone would want to be a social worker. And I've referenced you and said that this young man that I met had said that, and it makes people smile because they don't think in that way. So there's some really key things that you've highlighted there. So there's that first bit around instant gratification, and I know you've talked a lot about that, and that's really central to your work. So I want people to hear what you're saying. The other bit is around, when you're talking about lived experience, you're talking about really understanding, not just talking to someone that's got lived experience, but actually working to understand what that experience is like. So you saying about, you know, unless you've been in a trap house, and that language is sort of that language is talked about, but actually what does that mean? What does that mean in terms of all the different things and the impact that that may have had on someone? And the other thing that you said, which I guess goes back, I think, to the purpose side of things, was when you were talking around the I think you used the word love, but you were talking about love, and in my mind, I was going to belonging, and I was going to all the things that other people are going to, genuinely meet. Or it certainly will feel like that, but actually, what sits behind that is that exploitation. Which goes right back to the beginning bit that when I was hearing you saying is what the real sad thing is there for people. So much, so much. There's something else that you said to me. There's something else actually that you said earlier, which was talking about class, and people don't talk about that a lot. And I was struck when when I met you, and you were saying, I'm from a middle class background, and again, for people to recognise that exploitation cuts across. It isn't that there's only one type of victim, and you also talking about girls and thinking about how young women that go under the radar. But you said something else, and I think the other point that you made is around public health and thinking, how do we work with groups as opposed to just that one-on-one? And I suppose what you're highlighting is the power of the mutual influence, like that impact that each person in the group can have on each other. There's something else that you said to me before as well, which was around schools needing to recognise this problem as a problem, or as there being a drug issue in schools, for example. And if they don't, it's at the expense of children's lives.
Yeah. And to be honest, that is an extremely passionate topic for me. Education. I do believe that is where the real work lies. And unfortunately, mainstream schools across the country are simply not doing a good enough job at protecting our young people and actually preparing them for the real world, so to speak. Okay, so a couple of examples I've got of this, first-hand examples. I now actually work in schools as a youth worker. So it's some of this will come as a personal point of view, and some will also come as a professional, right? So in schools, a lot of them do have major drug issues. Drugs are coming in and out of schools. Even exploiters, drug dealers, they're known to target schools. Now, the issue that you've got is the second that a school admits that they have got a drug issue or even drugs being used within their school, within their service, then they're openly admitting that they cannot control what happens within their building. This doesn't look good for Ofsted, and it just doesn't look good for their overall reputation. But what I find most interesting about that is that most schools' mindset isn't about the protection of their young people. It is actually protection of their reputation, what is far, far more damaging than anything else they can do. And they just simply, if it's not there, it's not happening. And that is really the mindset that they have within education. And another thing that I really find in schools is that they create this environment that almost makes it easier for young people to take drugs. Now, the reason why I say this is because schools are incredibly overstimulating. They're incredibly negative places. There isn't enough positive language being used. And something that I really find frustrating from a personal point of view of working in a school is how they throw around this word safeguarding. Now, they say we're safeguarding Tom, Dick and Harry or whatever, but really they're not safeguarding them. They are safeguarding their responsibility. They are safeguarding their reputation. And what I get really frustrated about, and I will often pull them up on this, is that they're not using contextual safeguarding. Okay, they're not looking at why a young person is doing what they are doing. What environment is creating these situations? They're only looking at the individual itself, and that is not helping things whatsoever. I quite often sit in meetings, and it gets me incredibly frustrated. And I'm not trying to call out anyone here, or for any teachers that are listening. Hopefully, this is not you. But I will often sit in meetings and they'll say, "Oh, this young person's acting out at school." But what can you expect when the mum's a drug addict and there's 6, 7 kids in the house? They're just going to be a load of wrong uns, and there's nothing we can do. That's just their family, and that's that. Their family's got this reputation. Their family's this. Their family's that. And they really, really slag off parents in these meetings. And I've actually said it to some of these teachers. If these families were here within the room, they would be horrified to hear what you guys are actually saying about them. You haven't got any compassion. You have not got the best interests of the young person or their families at heart. You are simply using these meetings to slag off the family and basically saying, well, it's not the school's fault. This is their family's fault. This is what happens in their family. Not what, as a provision, can we do to change these situations? How can we benefit that family? Instead, oh no, they're right off. That's their family. That's what they're about. Who cares? And that is just horrific. How can we write off young people that are simply trying to get an education when they've also got loads of situations going on at home? If anything, to me, that screams that we need to be ploughing more support and more time into that young person in question and even their families. And this really nicely brings me on to another point. I'm really sorry that I bombard you with so much.
It's great.
But some of the real work that I am incredibly passionate about. So just for those that are listening, something that I now do is I go around educating young people on drugs, on the warning signs of debt bondage, grooming, exploitation, county lines, and all of these much needed topics. And it is incredibly powerful for the young people. I believe that they get as much out of it as they want. But the real work that I want to go into is training families, giving the families that knowledge so that they can carry on that legacy. Because I speak to, sometimes 200, 300, 400 kids all at once. And not all of them have got the ability to retain all of the information they're saying, okay? Because the reason why this is they're in school. They've already got enough going on. Something else that isn't taken into consideration enough is their SEND needs, their special education needs, their mental well-being, everything like that. When I feel like if I can give the parents, the carers, the people that are directly with them all the time, the correct information to carry on those conversations. So when they do start seeing the red flags, start spotting some signs that aren't right, that they are then equipped and prepared to know what to do. Because the reason why I got out of my situation really, after many, many years, I was involved for 6 to 7 years. And the thing that changed for me was my mum educated herself. She knew all about county lines. She knew all about exploitation. She spent years sitting there researching, knowing the different organisations that were out there. So every time that I would come home from a late night of doing whatever, she would then have a basic understanding of what I've possibly seen and what I've had to go through my day-to-day. She wouldn't meet me with confrontation. She wouldn't be like, well, you're staying out late, you're doing this. She would simply give me love. And that meant more than anything to me, because eventually I saw that all my mum was doing was giving me love and time, and I was throwing it in her face by doing everything she despised. And the guilt eventually ate me up. And I then worked with my mum to get me out of that situation, what proves that although it's an incredibly long process, and my mum nearly killed her over those 6 to 7 years of trying, but she wasn't going anywhere. She was always going to be my mum. And same with my dad. They hopefully your family's never going to give up on you. They have got the time that professionals haven't. Even if it's just that quick conversation every day at the dinner table. Oh, well, you're staying out later. Your phone's ringing. You know that me and your dad, carer, whatever it might be, just want the best for you. Although that's only a 5 minute conversation, if you're having those 5 minute conversations every single time, again, that person that's being exploited is going to start thinking, people do really care for me. People do really love me. And they're not asking me to go and put drugs up my bum or go and sell drugs to people that are trying to rob me and stab me. And eventually those clogs will start turning what real love and compassion looks like. Because when you've been stabbed and robbed or anything like that, you will get to a point and you think, well, is this really what love looks like? Is this really what normality looks like? Sitting in dirty conditions, sitting with people that are literally will do anything to have those drugs that you have in your possession. And you will start connecting those dots, and it's a bit of a journey from whoever's looking after that young person and the young person itself. So, yeah.
There's a really important message for practice there around a healthy respect for families. I think from the beginning of what you were saying and what that actually means by way of how we support families, how they're part of safeguarding. Like you talking, I remember when we spoke that you were saying that there wasn't anyone that was helping your mum understand or work out what was going on. And as you've just described, going through, online, trying to work out what is this and learning herself. So I think there's something really important that we are sharing our knowledge and helping families as well, and then supporting them to be able to do what you've just described.
Exactly that. I could not agree more.
You talked earlier on about you've got police chasing you around, you've got social workers chasing you around. What's the, and I've certainly, I've been part of that. I am part of that in the work that I do. What's the impact of that? What can they, I suppose what I'm wanting to think about is how could they best respond?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a really tricky one, to be honest with you. So the police, their job is to enforce the law, essentially, right? But again, it comes down to services really working together. I do believe in the saying, good cop, bad cop, right? You do need the police there to be that deterrent, to be the ones chasing you. There's got to be some sort of fight going on in some ways. But you've also then got to have the youth workers, the youth justice workers, exploitation hubs. They've got to play the good cop, right? And they even, so when a young person has been arrested, when they are in custody, quite often that is their most vulnerable state. They are in fight or flight. And quite often that is some of the best opportunities to get a young person to be open and honest about what is going on. Now, unfortunately, for the police, they are not going to be there, the ones that they open up to. But by having a youth justice worker in every sort of custody centre to be that good cop, to have that understanding that they're not there to enforce the law. Instead, they are there to safeguard and to benefit the young person itself. Now, being chased by the police is a terrifying experience. No one wants to get arrested. Everyone understands the repercussions of it. And how you kind of prevent that is having outreach work, like detached work. It's knowing those key hotspots and having youth justice workers go around engaging with those people, not even always initially identifying themselves as well. And something that it's a real tricky one, because the problem is with the police now, there are probably more drug dealers in every town than there are police officers. But also by working with the young people, with these youth workers and social workers and people like that, and getting them to identify who the exploiters are, who the top dogs are. That's what really needs to happen. We need to get to the very root of the issue. Maybe even, more surveillance on those young people, not initially going to arrest them, and finding the exact people that are supplying the young people, the exact people actually making all the money. I think is the real answer there. But it is incredibly tricky.
No, important point around that. While you might be the person police come in contact with, what they need to be doing is looking further up the chain, and looking at identifying and stopping or disrupting in their language those people that are making the money and doing the exploiting.
Yeah, exactly that. So spot on. Because they're the ones that are really, and something actually, sorry, that I have been speaking to a lot of exploitation hubs across the country, and they have actually now agreed to take this approach, but and informing some of their officers in custody that you do need to be taking more of that victim approach. Yes, they have been arrested. Yes, they have committed a crime, but you don't need to treat them like a criminal. Not at that point. Again, you really need to be building those relationships, trying to reinforce some sort of trust. Compassion is my key word for this whole podcast, to be honest with you. Showing that compassion, showing that little bit of empathy or understanding for what they might be going through. I don't believe anyone under the age of 16 being in custody is really the best scenario, to be honest with you. And I do believe anyone that is under the age of 16 that is in custody, is in a holding cell, whatever it might be, they do need to have that little bit more compassion. Again, they need to be treated slightly different to your average criminal. And the other thing as well, when someone's been exploited, I remember some people that were in the exact same situation as me, and they were getting arrested 4 times a week, maybe, for up to about 18 hours each arrest. That's a long time to be spending in and out of custody. But again, that is a long time that you could then start building a relationship with that young person. If they're in custody for 18 hours, 4 times a week, you get to start seeing the same police officers. You get to start having that opportunity to start getting to know each other at a one-to-one basis. I mean, it's not in the best case scenarios. It's not in the best environment, but you work with what you've got. It's all about adapting to, because criminals, they're constantly adapting. Police officers, youth workers, they now need to constantly start adapting. They need to start working at the same pace that these exploiters are, essentially.
This is a good message. Someone said to me the other day, well, of course we have to change. Of course our services have to change, because what's going on out there changes all the time. So I'm completely on the same page as you with that. I wanted to ask one more thing. So more broadly, public perception, for young people might see young people, and how do you think the public needs to change their perception of young people that might just be, they're involved in antisocial behaviour, or they're involved in drugs or crime and they're the problem? How do we need the public to see young people?
Yeah. So, and this is why I will quite often say that everyone has got a part to play in this fight against exploitation, no matter what type of exploitation, right? Because the public, they're the ones that really hold the power. Now, if the public was more forthcoming with employing the people that are the undesirables, giving those opportunities and sharing those opportunities across the communities, you'd have a better outcome. Something that I've always said is setting a stole, but it takes a village to raise a child, right? And the issue that we have now currently got is it's so accessible to get around the country. It's so accessible to stay in contact with people from Scotland if you want, right? But what we really need to start looking is actually closer to home. What can we all do on our own doorstep? How can we all support each other? How can we all make sure that there's employment within every single community. How can we make sure that our young people feel like they are wanted, that they feel like they are actually embedded and in part of, the whole neighbourhood watch, so to speak, and yeah, I really do feel like that is some of the bigger problems that we now face, is the stereotypes that young people have. And we need to get rid of all of them. And this is where business partners all need to come together and actually think, let's employ people from our own area. Let's employ people that are more like-minded, that not necessarily are great academically, but maybe more great physically. And again, it is all about, we all need to now have a mindset of seeing people, thinking, you can be something. Now, what that is, you don't know until you work with them, essentially. And one of the best things I always say to anyone that is actually trying to help this situation is get to know a young person, get to understand their hobbies, and find out if you can turn that hobby into a job. Okay, so the reason why I say this is because employment, if someone's in full-time employment, they haven't really got the time to be selling drugs or to be exploited. They're not the preferred people to be exploited, right? And if you can see that someone is a keen cyclist, right, or likes biking about, get them working at Halfords, get them fixing those bikes, get them part of that bike network and that bike community. Someone likes taking photos or whatever it might be, get them into some sort of photography course. It's just about seeing that someone likes doing something, let's turn it into a job. Let's turn it into something that benefits absolutely everyone. And one last thing that I'll leave you on is I just think everyone should have community projects going on in every town and in every village, and having some sort of incentive, because it is quite hard for young people to get employed under the age of 60. The laws in the UK really, really create big problems. So let's overcome those problems. Maybe we can't pay them in money or the right wage they actually deserve, but we can still, give them some sort of things that are worth more than money, if that makes sense. So,
I'm
yeah.
I'm sat here thinking, I hope you end up in politics one day, and that many of the things you talk about can be advocated for. There's so many things that we could have covered. There's so many more things that I want to talk to you about again. I hope we can do this again. I need to think about all of the stuff that, where we go next. But I wanted to say how grateful I am that you joined me, but also how grateful I am to be able to make this and to get your messages out, because they're all messages that people need to hear. So thank you very much.
No, honestly, I really appreciate that. Thank you. But if anyone should be thanking anyone here, it's you. Because if we didn't have these opportunities, these platforms to actually speak about these topics, then people aren't going to be educated about it. And I'm so, so grateful for you giving me the platform and your time as well. So thank you very much.